Despite the consensus reached between China and the Philippines over disputes in the South China Sea, Manila authorities unilaterally filed for compulsory arbitration against China. But is the arbitral tribunal authoritative and impartial? And what is compulsory arbitration? Our reporter Huna has more details.
On January 22, 2013, the Philippines unilaterally filed the arbitration against China at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. And the case paperwork refers to maritime jurisdiction in the South China Sea. And now the question is the arbitral tribunal authoritative and impartial? And what is compulsory arbitration? Compulsory arbitration is the final and the most extreme form of dispute resolution for an aggrieved unclosed party, but the other party has the right to opt out. And this right is explicitly stated in Article 298. This can be over the interpretation or application of certain provisions regarding sea boundary delimitations or those involving historic bay or titles. Both China and the Philippines reference the compulsory arbitration opt-out provisions of Article 298 when they signed onto the UNCLOS. Still, the Philippines initiated the arbitration to gain leverage in the territorial dispute. China is acting within its right to reject the jurisdiction of the tribunal, and the tribunal is acting like many other transnational bureaucracies do in seeking to expand its authority over sovereign states. Compulsory arbitration can only be applied when the interpretation or application of the convention is concerned. But UNCLOS doesn't cover territorial sovereignty. The Philippines has chosen the wrong venue. The arbitral tribunal is overstepping its authority.
In 2013, the Philippines unilaterally filed a compulsory arbitration against China at a Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. It regards the dispute over what the case file terms maritime jurisdiction in the South China Sea. China rejects the arbitration and believes the Philippines violated its own commitment to resolve disputes through dialogue and negotiation. In an exclusive interview with our reporter Wang Hui, spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry Lu Kang explained how this arbitration affects relations between China and the Philippines.
China's principled position on that is already well known, that we are not in the position to abide by that, to accept any result from that, and because this is already a violation of the commitment by the Philippine government, whether under the DOC, whether under the bilateral agreement framework between China and the Philippine government, and also that's a violation of UNCLOS itself. So you know that if a sovereign government makes some commitment and then violate it, that will ruin the basic trust between sovereign governments. We don't think that's very helpful in the bilateral relationship. You know that China cares only about the interests of all the peoples, including Chinese people in this region. So we care about the peace, stability, and the prosperity in this region. That's not only China's wish, that's also the wish of all the countries in this region. And I have to be honest that the preservation of the peace, stability, and prosperity in this region will also serve the interests of the international community as a whole. Because if you look worldwide, today this region has been one of the most important, if not the most important, engine for economic growth worldwide. So we hope that any country, any outsiders, if they would like to play a role in this region, they have to respect the gender of the peoples in this region, and their intervention should be helpful in preserving the interests, the peace, stability, and prosperity of this region. If that's against the genuine wish of the people of this region, definitely China is also
on
against.
the South China Sea, tensions in the region have intensified as the United Nations Tribunal ruling on maritime disputes between China and the Philippines approaches. And the Philippines filed an arbitration case challenging China's claims in the region. What China argued its indisputable sovereignty is based on historical evidence. Now, Li Guoqiang, Deputy Director of the Institute of Chinese Borderland Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, explained China's historical claims.
那么早在秦汉时期啊，中国人民就在南海呢开始自己的航行活动。根据目前所见史料，最晚到东汉时期，中国人民呢就已经对南海呢有了命名。这个命名呢就叫长海齐头，而长海这个词就是中国古人对南海最早的称谓。那么到了宋代，中国人民对于南海不同地区、不同岛礁的认知呀更加的清晰所以在宋代文献里边出现了10堂名字。类似这样的地图和文献呢，就有上百种之多。那么在古代历史时期呢，中国人民对于南海的开发和经营，主要体现在航路的开辟和渔业生产活动这2个方面。早在汉代，中国人民就开辟了从我国东南沿海地区，经过西沙海域、南沙海域，通往东南亚地区的海上之路。那么这就是大家都知道的海上丝绸之路。而在相当长的时间里边，中国人民是这个海上丝绸之路上最重要的甚至是唯一的这个航行者。正是基于中国人民最早发现、最早命名、最早开发经营的基础上那么最晚到了唐宋时期，中国政府开始对南海实施行政管辖那么在设置行政管辖的同时到宋代又设置了水师那么水师实施巡视南海，这个执行守卫这个南海的这样一个任务而到了明清时期，巡视南海、守卫海疆的这样一个任务呢，形成制度，并且日益规范。基于上述大量的历史事实和基于充分确凿的历史文献，我们可以这样认为在中国自古以来对于南海诸岛拥有主权和相关权利，历史事实是充分的，历史证据是确凿的那么中国对南海诸岛的主权的这样一个立场也是不可变的。
Although Japan occupied some of China's Nansha Islands in the South China Sea during World War II, no country in the world disputed China's maritime rights in the region before the 1930s. Now the question is, does China own the Nansha Islands? In 1943, the Cairo Declaration stated that all the territories Japan has stolen from the Chinese shall be restored to China. Japan and the Taiwan Authority signed a peace treaty in 1952. It recognized that Japan renounced all right, title, and claim to Taiwan and Penghu, as well as the Spratly Islands and the Paracel Islands, or the Nansha and Shisha Islands. Regional neighbors, including the Philippines, made no territorial claims to the maritime features at the time. But since the 1960s, Vietnam has illegally occupied 29 of China's Nansha Islands, Malaysia 5, and the Philippines 8. Lots of maps and books published in the U.S. in the 1960s and 70s all recognize China's sovereignty over the Nansha Islands. For example, Wordmark Encyclopedia of the Nations, published in 1963, and Constitutions of the Countries of the World in 1971. These books, declaration, and treaty all serve as the historical evidence that the Nansha Islands belong to China, and the Philippines is in no position to file the arbitration.
Have reported that the Philippines and Japan have reached a consensus on the ruling of the South China Sea arbitration case during Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's visit to the country. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says China and the Philippines have agreed to focus on cooperation and jointly move the South China Sea issue back towards bilateral negotiation and consultation.
We've also noted that President Duterte's public remarks in Japan are generally in the same vein with the spirit of his statements in China. In order to truly grasp the position of the Philippine government, it's better to listen to the Philippine leader's own words, which I think will be more credible. At present, thanks to the concerted efforts of relevant parties, including China and the Philippines, the situation in the South China Sea is showing positive signs of easing up. All relevant parties are endeavoring to resolve the South China Sea issue through dialogue and consultation. Such efforts meet the aspiration of the majority of countries in the region. Some country had better give up its illusions if this do claim to some.
China's foreign ministry says it's communicating with the Philippines over improving cooperation in fishing in a disputed area of the South China Sea after President Rodrigo Duterte's visit to Beijing last week.
The relationship between China and the Philippines has entered a stage of improvement. Under these circumstances, it's very likely that the two sides will return to managing differences through negotiation and focusing on cooperation. During President Duterte's visit, our two leaders discussed the issue of fishing cooperation, including fishing industry cooperation in the South China Sea. What I can tell you is that both sides are in communication over this issue.
Legal experts have held a symposium in Beijing on the recent arbitration case involving parts of the South China Sea. The experts said the tribunal which heard the case had violated international law and justice. Experts said that instead of resolving disputes in the South China Sea, the arbitration had in fact increased regional tension, casting a shadow on regional peace and stability.
Disputes between China and the Philippines concern the ownership of islands. Aided by the United States, the Philippines ignored historical facts and bypassed provisions in Article 298 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
The arbitration did not solve the problem. It has caused more trouble. This is the most absurd part of the tribunal we've seen.
China is calling on the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to manage differences over South China Sea issues. Senior diplomats from both sides met in China's northern city of Manzhouli. They agreed to stick to the declaration on the conduct of parties in the South China Sea. The document was signed in 2002 to regulate activity there. China and ASEAN countries are also mulling a hotline to handle maritime emergencies. China has maritime disputes with other countries around the South China Sea. CCTV's Su Uting spoke to the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Lo Zhenmen about the meeting.
We will adopt two documents. One is the joint statement on the application of the Qs. The Qs means that there is a code for the unplanned encounters at sea. So actually this is a code for the operation of navies. But by adopting this joint statement for the application in South China Sea, it would be help to regulate the navy activities in South China Sea. That also help to avoiding and preventing the risks and the accidents and the incidents. Second document, we adopted the guidelines for the operation of the hotlines among foreign ministries in response to maritime emergencies. So these two documents would seems technical, but politically very significant. It helps to strengthen mutual trust among China and ASEAN members.